Well, hey there, and welcome to Vitruvian Book Review number 27 for 2021. This was a fantastic read. Endure by Alex Hutchinson is a great read. All right, as an at-home athlete, if you will, which basically means that I don't compete in anything worthwhile and everything I do is kind of pathetic, but nevertheless, I want to have great endurance. I want to stay in as good a health as I possibly can, and so I'm always trying to crack the code on what can I do to enhance life extension and to be as healthy as possible. And in fact, I want more endurance, okay? And again, cue the making fun of me comments. I deserve them. I get it because I'm going to talk about my flipping Peloton, which does not in any way compare to the stories in this book, okay? So I've said that. Disclaimer. I know it doesn't compare. But when I'm on that stupid Peloton, I want to know how I can enhance my endurance. I don't want the rides to hurt as much as they do. I want to be in shape. And of course, you got to have a little bit of resistance. You got to have a little bit of a challenge. But what can you do to best optimize your physical capabilities? What Alex Hutchinson does in this book is he endeavors to answer the question, is it truly a matter of mind over matter? Or is it all physical? Is it physiology? What is it that makes a world-class athlete that can actually push themselves to the brink enough to be legendary? I mean, we have had athletes, and there's story after story in this book of athletes either doing like deep free dives that went down and never came back up. There have been stories of mountain climbers that have gone beyond their limits only to die. What pushed them beyond that point where their bodies could not take anymore? And that's what Alex Hutchinson endeavors to do. And he does it with all the research and opposing views. Because you have some that argue, look, the bottom line is there's only so much the human body can do. You can only stimulate the body so much before it craps out and it can't go beyond a certain point. Then there's this idea, is there in each of us an internal governor? Is there something in the brain that says, hey, you may want to go further? And in fact, your body might be able to go a little further, but there's this governor in your brain that says no. Well, you can imagine if you are an endurance athlete and you are told, hey, there's this thing in your brain that's holding you back. And if you can just crack that code, then you might be able to go a little bit further. You think that in this day and age, every major performance enhancing endurance athlete wouldn't be trying to crack that code? Of course they would. And that's what this whole book is about. It's all the studies to try to figure out, what is it? Is it just VO2 max? Because that's one of the things and that Alex Hutchinson actually goes back to figuring out, okay, going back as far as we can in the study of endurance and the study of all these physical traits that make a world-class athlete, how can they push to certain limits? He goes all the way back to, I think it was the 20s where they first started to measure VO2 max, the body's maximum oxygen absorption rate. How much oxygen can you actually absorb? Which, again, it's learning little technical things like that I honestly did not really realize. I always took VO2 max to mean the measure of how much oxygen is expounded, but actually your VO2 max is how much your body can actually absorb. So obviously the healthier you are, the better cardiovascular condition you're in, the higher your VO2 max. It explains that in depth. But there's still something that if that were all it was only training to a certain level. If you were to take someone and go, okay, there are these certain measurements, and if you click at the top of the box of all three of these measurements, then you will be the world-class athlete. We would know before a marathon's even run, all things being equal and relatively similar on a day, weather's right, conditions are right, you're feeling good, we would know pretty much who's going to win. But we don't, do we? Sometimes there is the unexpected victor. And what can that be? Probably something in the brain, probably something untapped. And that's what this book talks about. And it's phenomenal story after story of people that do things that I think are just absolutely insane, quite frankly. I wish that I could push myself the way some of these athletes do. It is beyond comprehension. And this is something that I wanted to read to you from the book that I thought was it pretty much summed it up. So if you're wondering, is it all physical? Is it more mental? Which is it? That's the age old question. What's going to determine the real champion? Is it going to be their head and their heart, meaning not their, like their kind of figuratively their heart, or is it just physical endurance and capability? And it turns out that this is the kind of basic truth. Once you accept that conclusion, an inevitable question looms. How do you train effort? The standard answer, and still the best one, is that you train your body. If you want running at a 5-minute mile pace to feel easier, you should head out the door and run at a 5-minute mile pace a lot. Over time, your heart will begin to get stronger, your muscles will grow more energy producing mitochondria, and you'll sprout new capillaries to distribute oxygen rich blood. These changes will allow you to sustain a 5-minute pace with less physiological strain, and they'll also attenuate the distress signals that your muscles and heart send back to the brain. The pace will feel easier, so you'll be able to sustain it for longer. Explaining the effects of training by talking about effort rather than, say, VO2 max is a provocative shift in perspective, but it doesn't really tell us anything new about how to train. So to sum up, and it goes back, and I think it's, here we go. Here's another kind of hard truth, if you will. This book isn't a training manual. Still, it's impossible to explore the nature of human limits without wondering about the best ways to transcend them. In the end, the most effective limit changers are still the simplest. So simple that we've barely mentioned them. If you want to run faster, it's hard to improve on the training haiku penned by Mayo Clinic physiologist Michael Joyner, the man whose 1991 journal paper foretold the 2-hour marathon chase. Run a lot of miles, some faster than your race pace, rest once in a while. This is the way I would surmise the book. It's not an either or answer, really. It's not that it's all in your brain, it's all having mental toughness. It's not all about having that David Goggins I will endure more pain than anyone can thrust upon me. It doesn't matter. I will endure. It's not just that David Goggins kind of hardcore mentality. It's not just being the greatest. It's not just being the most physically fit specimen. It's not being the Ivan Drago. There you go. That the old Rocky IV. There's a great fictional account. It's physical versus mental. And in that case, mental and heart won, right? Rocky beat the scientific, I guess, epitome of boxers. And it's a combination of both. Because what happens is the more you train, the more your brain realizes you're prepared to take more. But nevertheless, it's going to still hurt. It will still hurt. Your brain will still say, hey, you're pushing to the limits. It just, the warning, the signals won't be as strong if you've prepared. But the bottom line is, and here is, I think, Alex Hutchinson's final conclusion. If you take two athletes who are willing to endure and train and go through the grueling process of getting their bodies physically fit through punishment, torture, extreme heat, extreme cold, extreme exhaustion, if they're willing to do that over and over and over and over and over, you put those two people together, then it becomes a matter of who is willing to take the most punishment. And that's something that you can just stave off. The physical fitness will stave off the acute pain in your warning in your brain. But when both of you reach that point, it's really still a mystery. There's really no answer for why David Goggins can do what David Goggins can do. there's really no answer for why Marcus Luttrell was able to be the lone survivor and endure what he did, to survive by himself and go through what he went through. There's really no answer as to why, any athlete that is willing to push themselves to the brink of even death is willing to do it. It's just something inside that they have, that they're willing to go that step further. But it it has to be coupled with, if you want a stronger endurance mentally, it has to be stronger endurance physically. You got to prepare for it physically, because what it does is it pushes, it staves off that red warning signal a little longer. But then at some point, no matter how good a shape you're in, that's going to go off. And there's just some really good accounts of like the sub 2 minute, or excuse me, the sub 2 hour marathon that Nike put on. They talk about that a lot, and in fact, that's where the story starts and where the story ends. Is kind of Kipchoge, who was the athlete who was tasked by Nike to try to clock a sub 2 hour marathon time. It was in the end, what could it be? The shoes, money? Could it be the running in the perfect conditions? If everything were perfect, could the human body, could that happen? If all things were just absolutely perfect weather, perfect track, and then you have the perfect athlete, if you got all that, could the athlete pull it off? I'm not going to tell you whether he did or not. I did not know. I had heard Peter Attia talk a little bit about the Nike fiasco that was the sub 2 hour marathon, and kind of the controversy surrounding it. Does that time really count? And they don't count it against any of the records, because it was so contrived, and it wasn't a typical marathon in that you have to, at the Boston Marathon, if the weather sucks, you're still running in sucky weather. And so everything was just perfect. And you had these special shoes that did actually prove to have an impact. So I won't tell you whether Kipchoge, if you happen to not know, whether he actually reached the sub 2 minute mile or not, 2 hour marathon or not, whether he did or not, because Alex Hutchinson's writing is so well done that it actually makes for a great climatic ending of the book that I really enjoyed. And that's another thing too. I like Alex Hutchinson's writing. He's a journalist for, I think, Runner's World or something to that effect. A former endurance athlete himself. So great writing, great stories, and some really cool things to consider in training, and both for mental toughness as well as physical endurance, and kind of coupling those and trying to figure out what it takes to get kind of that perfect code to get the most out of your own body. I highly recommend this book. I would check it out if you have any desire at all to improve your endurance, to improve your health, great book. So Vitruvian Book Review 27 for 2021, Endure by Alex Hutchinson, gets a thumbs up. I would check it out. And by the way, please, 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 if you would, listen to the Jason Wright Show. So reading books like this and actually trying to make sure that I read no less than one book a week for all of 2021 is part of my endeavor to improve always and always, which is what the whole Jason Wright Show is all about. I interview top performers in all walks of life, whether it's health and wellness, whether it's a New York Times bestselling author, whether it's an incredible entrepreneur. On the Jason Wright Show, I interview these folks, and in my effort to improve always and always, I try to glean information from them, wisdom from them that I think I can carry into my own life. So please consider checking it out on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. I would be grateful if you would join me. And also subscribe to my Vitruvian letter. That's my personal newsletter. That's where I take all the content and all the experiments and everything that I'm doing in this effort to improve always and always. And I kind of put it in one easy place to just get it all, take as much as you want, leave as much as leave whatever you don't. But once a week in your inbox, free of charge, not a bunch of spamming, just a deal. Hey, this is some things, and usually includes one article, some little nugget of wisdom or something that really meant something to me that I kind of processed and really chewed on and then fleshed out in the form of an article. I'll usually include that as well. So the Vitruvian letter, you can actually subscribe to that at jasonwrightnow.com. I'd be grateful if you did. And please listen to the podcast. And with that, I hope you, yes, you, my friend, will endeavor to improve always in all ways. Thanks for checking out this book review. I'm out.